Hey guys, how's it going? It's Andy. I'm a biologist up in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're talking about some of the TikTok comments that I've gotten on recent posts. I like to talk about invasive species, how we manage them, and because of that, I've gotten some really interesting comments in the past couple weeks, and I wanted to talk about some that I feel like most people don't have a really good understanding about unless you are working in the restoration field. If you enjoy this video, I really appreciate it if you hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for future posts. So the first comment we're talking about today is there's no point in getting worked up about these invasive species that are a permanent part of the ecosystem now. I hate dealing with them too. So this was in a video talking about how we manage invasive species, and this person's comment is referencing the fact that I mentioned that most of these species that are established in our ecosystems are not going to go away anytime soon. I'd love to think that, we could put in all this effort and completely eradicate many of these invasive species that are doing a lot of damage. That is not really realistic. Once they've taken hold, it is very difficult to get rid of them. So this person is commenting saying, well, why do we worry about them if they're going to be a constant part of our ecosystems going forward? And this is really important in deciding where you want to restore native areas. We don't have the abilities or manpower to restore everything or completely eradicate this species. So we need to focus on areas that are going to be the most beneficial. We look at areas that have the highest level of something like ecosystem services. These are things that the environment provides for humans that can be quantified. This could be something like producing shade, where you do a lot of work on rivers and streams for shade credit, stuff where we have native plants that are shading out the water, which will cool down the average water temperature, which is beneficial for native plants and the salmon populations. You can do stuff that does ecosystem services that protects from floods. You can do stuff that has cultural benefits. So it's all about picking areas that are going to have the biggest bang for your buck. It's not worth going into this completely abandoned field and trying to put all this time, effort, and money into restoring it. We try to pick areas that have high levels of diversity because the more species that we can protect with our efforts, the more beneficial it's going to be. We try to pick areas that are unique. We don't want to pick something that we have plenty of already. We're trying to save areas like wetlands that wetlands cannot be found anywhere. We have plenty of conifer forests out here, but we don't have enough wetlands. So it's really important to protect those type of areas. And then we try to pick areas that are going to have long-term benefits, because it's not worth spending a couple years trying to restore an area and then people realize, oh, maybe it's not worth it, and they just give up on it, because eventually, if it's not fully restored, it's going to be taken back by these invasive species. We need to have enough of a time frame where we can let the native species take over and can shade out these invasive species to try to make it so that we don't have to be working on these sites forever. So while we're not going to be able to get rid of these invasive species forever, we try to pick areas that are going to have the best bang for their buck, and that's why we pick specific areas and wetlands very frequently. So the next comment I wanted to talk about says, I think you should also explain the differences between invasive and non-native species. I try to be very particular when I talk about the different types of species that we see out on the sites that I work on. We have native species, stuff that has been around here for a long time and no longer impacts the native ecosystems. We have non-native species and we have invasive species. Non-native species are ones that are not native to the region that we're in right now, but they don't do a lot of the long-term damage that the invasive species do. The common one that I think about is apple trees. Apple trees are not native to the wetlands that I'm working on. However, if you go and see an apple tree out there, it provides food for the native animals. Deer love apples, but you're never going to see 1,000 apple trees popping up because of one tree that was planted there. So they're not a huge damage to the ecosystem, and it's not really worth the time and effort to try to get rid of them. This is in contrast to the invasive species that once they take hold, they do a lot of damage to the native ecosystems. I think about stuff like Himalayan blackberry that takes over the areas that it's established. It builds these massive brambles that choke out native species from light and nutrients, and it really gets in the way of people being able to enjoy the habitats. This could be humans, this could be animals, it could be waterways. These invasive species create long-term damage to the ecosystems, and that's why we try to manage them the best we can. We're not going to be able to get rid of them completely, but in the areas that we have determined to be worth the time and effort, we try to get rid of these invasive species. Non-native species are something that we could get rid of. They're not supposed to be here, but they're not causing massive damage right now, so we're not really worried about them because we have the invasive species to focus on. So that's why I try to differentiate the difference between non-native species and the invasive species. So in a video talking about how we get rid of invasive plants, I talked a lot about herbicide use. People really do not like talking about herbicide, and this comment here says that goats are the answer. Goats are a really interesting way of managing plant growth. You can set them out into a nature area, fence them off, and they'll eat all of the plants in that area. This seems like a really beneficial thing. I remember growing up and people used to set up the goats in areas to try to limit wildfire risk. This is fantastic. The problem with goats is that they are non-selective. They do not have the type of knowledge that a biologist like myself has in being able to differentiate the difference between native and non-native or invasive plants. They're going to go in and eat anything pretty much green because they really don't care. They're just trying to eat as much as they can. So this is great in an area that is very early on in the site prep stage where pretty much everything in this field is going to be invasive species. So we're fine with killing it all. But in an area that's been planted a couple times and has been managed for a couple seasons, you're going to have a mix of invasive plants, non-native plants, and native plants. So the reason that we go in with herbicide is that I know what plants are native and which ones are not. So I can go in and spray the plants that are going to be doing the most damage while being sure to minimize the damage of herbicide on the native plants. These goats are going to come in and eat pretty much everything. Also, the scale that we work on, some of the sites that we're visiting for work are up to 100 acres, and goats are fine if it's a relatively small area. They'll come in and eat your grass within a week or two, but it's not really realistic to have them out on a 100-acre plot just because they're going to be there for a long time. They're going to be very full and they're going to destroy the native species as well. So goats are a great option for people with private property that are trying to get rid of maybe grasses that increase the risk of fire damage, or just areas that are completely overrun with invasive species. But once you've gone in and planted some trees, shrubs, we've done wildflower seeds, they're not going to be able to differentiate between what's good and what's bad, and that's why goats are not really the best answer when it comes to restoration in a large scale. Small scale, sure, goats are a pretty interesting option. So this is going to be the last comment of the day, and what's the value in freezing an arbitrary point in time when nature is and has been dynamic? This is a great point that nature is not a fixed thing. We have different changes in climate. Things change in ecosystems over time. We have water flowing through an area, it's going to create erosion. It's going to take out some plants and new plants are going to take its spot. The difference is that with climate change and the huge increase in human influence over the past century plus, plants have been moving in at a faster rate than the ecosystem can handle. Back in the past, when evolution is able to take place over a long period of time, if you have an invasive plant come in, it's going to eventually get to an equilibrium point. That's going to happen over hundreds of years as the plants kind of find their own niche in these ecosystems. The problem is we are throwing hundreds, thousands of invasive plants in at the same time, and it's not going to allow the native species to compete with these plants. So the way that we try to mitigate that is that we pick specific areas that have been deemed important to protect. I mentioned this earlier, they have high diversity, they're unique ecosystems, and we want to protect them. So it would be fantastic if we could just let nature do its own thing. The problem is if we did that, we would result in a lot of the native species going extinct. They're going to be choked out of their native habitat because they cannot compete with these invasive species that are better at dealing with the changing climate, human disturbance, all these different things. That's why we pick these specific areas to work on, because plants cannot survive without help in some places. So we're trying to make sure that we have enough of the native species surviving for the long term, and that's why we go in and pick these places instead of just letting nature do its thing, because we would result in a monoculture of invasive plants taking over a lot of the native habitats that we know and love. So this is a really interesting topic on deciding where we go in to put in our time, effort, and money to try to save these native habitats. And that's the hardest part about this, is that you can see areas that I would love to restore. The problem is it doesn't have that much value when you compare to some of the other areas like wetlands. So you really need to pick and choose what is worth the time, and we're not going to be able to get to everything, so that's why we pick very high value areas. And so, fantastic topic. If you would like to leave future comments, let me know in the comment section down below, or you can follow me on TikTok at PNW Plants, and I will take comments from there as well. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I would really appreciate if you hit the like and subscribe button, as it would help my channel out a lot, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.